Today, I want to talk about the difference between Hinduism and Hindutva and the attempt to stir up some controversy, for example, by Dr. Shashi Tharoor, that there is some cleavage or there is some difference between these two terms. And what Tharoor is saying is that he and the party he represents is Hindu. But the Hindutva of the BJP, he says, is not Hindu. It is antithetical to Hinduism. Now, to start off with, we can see that there are some scholars who have looked into this before, like Professor Arvind Sharma. And but before we really dive into this question, we must first notice that Hinduism, the very word, it actually means the same thing as Hindutva. Hinduism is an English word, and it means something which is the unifying or the universal corresponding to the Indic religions, which at the time, by the British laws in India, they were recognized to have this name of Hindu. So Hinduism, it's an English word, but what does it mean? It means the set. It is a universal, and you can say it's a concrete universal. It's the set of all those people who worship in a particular way, and this is a matter where there could be controversy, but it's a matter where you could go to court, and the court would say, well, this is Hindu and this is not Hindu. So really what you can say is that Hinduism, the word Hinduism, it has both an intentional aspect. Intentional in the sense that it has a priori definition. And in fact, what we could say is that there's a Kripkean rigid designator for Hinduism. And in fact, that's the one that the law uses. It is that whatever historically has been Hindu remains Hindu unless there is some overt act of conversion, and more particularly, it has to be an act of conversion to a non-Indic religion. So it has to be an Abrahamic religion like Christianity or Islam or Judaism. Or else it has to be sufficiently un-Indian, that it's, in other words, so really what you can say is that Hinduism is itself a philosophical word. It has an intentional definition. But that intentional definition, that means it is defined within itself. Hindus can have a definition of Hinduism from within Hinduism. But that definition may be contested, and we're familiar with this. We know that in physics and biology and mathematics and economics, in every field, and more particularly in the social sciences, you will have things where there are essentially contested definitions. Where, in other words, just having a definition means that there is going to be some contest. It's going to be worth somebody's while to say, well, I disagree. I don't think X belongs to this class. I think X belongs to a different class. And in India, of course, for hundreds of years now, there has been a judicial hermeneutic, a judicial decision-making process. It's a protocol-bound decision process, juristic decision process, which has its own rules of how you present the evidence and what sort of arguments can be entertained. And then there is statute law, there is, then you have stare decisis, you have binding decisions made by previous higher courts. And so this is it's a matter which is a matter of legal hermeneutics. It's a matter of jurisprudence. So Hinduism, what is it? Well, it's an abstract term, and it has a legal meaning, and that meaning is of a Kripkean type, that you are a Hindu if there has been no overt act by any of your ancestors such that you cease to be a Hindu and started to belong to some religion which originated outside India. Now, the word Hindutva, it's not an English word, but it's very similar because tattva means essence. And you can say Hinduism is the essence of Hindus, of all things which come under the rubric of what is Hindu. And similarly, you can say that Hindutva is everything which is that which is essential, the essential aspects of Hinduism, rather than the accidental or contingent aspects of Hinduism. So, in essence, is something which is true in all possible worlds. So, for example, when we look at India, we see that there is a caste system. Of course, that caste system exists, even it existed among the Jews of India. It existed among the Muslims. It exists among the Muslims. It exists among the Christians. But caste, by the way, a caste system also exists among the Hindus of Bali. But there is no untouchability. They have four castes, four varnas, but they don't have untouchability. On the other hand, in Japan, where there was never any Hinduism, they do have untouchability. But they had Buddhism, so maybe Buddhism is what brought or what reinforced untouchability there. On the other hand, when you look at some Polynesian cultures, they have an untouchable class, and they have a very strong concept of taboo, of ritual pollution. And there are some similarities between the notion of taboo and how certain personages become taboo. There are some similarities with rules regarding ritual purity in some Hindu traditions. Now, for example, the Iyengars, who have sort of a hereditary leaders, so there are some rules that they observe regarding ritual purity, which they could, an anthropologist might say, well, this is similar to the taboos concerning the sacred kings of some Polynesian cultures. So, you see, untouchability, yes, it does exist in some other faraway regions, like in the Pyrenees or in West Africa or in Japan. But it's not essentially Hindu. In other words, the presence of Hinduism doesn't mean that untouchability exists, because Bali, you have pure Hinduism. Anybody can see with their own eyes that the priests are chanting Sanskrit and the Ramayana, the Mahabharata. In many respects, Bali has a richer. You feel that this is a very learned Hindu community, whereas in some parts of India which are poorer, you could say, they are less Hindu. The culture is more of a similar to the animistic tribal culture. And, the anthropologists and the historians, they say, well, you see, this particular group came into India quite recently. They're speaking this type of language, or they're, So, the point I'd make is that when it comes to Hinduism as a matter of empirical fact, we can see that the essence of Hinduism, maybe it does have a notion of caste, like that in Bali, but maybe not. Because after all, when you look at, Hinduism is now also flourishing in places like here in London, or in America, or elsewhere, or in Trinidad. or elsewhere. And, there you can find that there is some mention of caste, but it seems so unrelated to life, to who people actually marry, how they entertain each other, the way of life is completely unconnected with it. So this is rather like within Judaism, there is a distinction between the Kohen, and the Levite and the rest. There is it's there in the rules, but it doesn't really seem to have much practical effect. Maybe in the state of Israel, if a Kohen wants to marry a divorced lady, maybe he has to go to Cyprus or something like that. I don't know. But Israel is rather, Israel may change. It's not been around for very long, and we don't really know what direction it's going in. But in Europe, certainly we can see that whereas 200 years ago, they're genuinely, if you go to South Italy, or if you go to Spain, or if you go to, or even here in England, or in Ireland, there was this distinction between those who were of the blue-blooded, the aristocracy and the nobility. In Germany, in Poland, of course, there was the Golden Liberties. Under the system of the Golden Liberties, 1/10 of the population, they were classified as aristocrats. They may be very poor, but they had superior rights. And in fact, they had the power to elect the king. They had, from their point of view. And I think, that the persistence of that sense of a aristocratic caste, perhaps that was one reason why, if you look in the 1950s at Poland, it is actually doing rather well under communism. This may, it's difficult for a right-wing person to accept this. But, of course, in India, we knew Kripkean, who came to visit us. He's a smart guy. And, Indian diplomats, when they spoke to the Polish people, they saw that, look, the Polish non-aristocrat, they did resent that caste feeling which had persisted. And I very much doubt that it still obtains in Poland. But this is, a relatively recent development. Similarly, in Hungary, there was this, there was a difference between the blue blood and the, that sort of thing. And in Germany, it was, of course, Germany and Russia were a little bit different. In that service to the state meant that you got a title, so you got the von so-and-so. And in China, of course, was more successful, 1,200, 1,300 years ago, in getting rid of the distinction between those who are in clean jobs and those who are reputable, the clean and the unclean. And of course, there, again, the center was powerful enough, the emperor was powerful enough to remove these type of prejudices so that he could have a meritocratic bureaucracy and army. And so one reason for the cultural homogeneity of China is that all the Han population, whichever clan they may belong to, they have that feeling that, yes, among our ancestors, there were generals, there were scholars, there were mandarins, there were emperors, there were, okay, even though Mao spotted, he came from an upper peasant family, and instead of identifying with the Mandarin class, he said, well, look, the fact is that though the system is not supposed to allow Mandarins, in other words, educated bureaucrats, to perpetuate their privilege, though, in practice that's what's happening. So he did give a voice to the discontent within the village, but notice that the Chinese village, virtually everybody belonged to the same clan. So they knew that, look, because they kept records of their of their ancestors. They knew that they were all descended from the same people. Yet one group, from generation to generation, was, remained subservient, remained very poor and thin, and they would sell their daughters to the affluent so as to provide them with brides. So that Mao's genius was to pick on that, and he exploited that so that his method of collectivization it imposed a caste system on the Chinese village. That it created the good class and the bad class. The good class being those guys who had been poor, who had been bad. They became the good class, and the bad class became, But that experiment didn't last very long, and now it seems to have just simply vanished from memory. So really, you can say that China, the essence of Chinese civilization, though it did have caste, at one time, but it's disappeared. So essentially, it's not part of Chinese culture. And the question arises whether caste is an essential part of Indian culture. And here, if you look at what the acharyas, dharmacharyas, they are saying no, caste is not an essential feature of the Hindu religion. That you see some people, and now it's been accepted that some of them will be women. Because previously, even 50 years ago, people thought, no, women are inferior. They can't be this. Or even if they are spiritually superior, still, they should stay at home and they should. But now we expect our women to go and be paratroopers and to go and defend the border and to get into submarines and, and when we watch a movie, we expect the heroine to jump into the air and do karate and kung fu and kick the head off. Whereas even in the 70s, there'll be the rapist and the Now, of course, we would expect, or maybe in 10 years' time, we will see the hero cowering as the woman turns up with a strap on. I don't know. These are things which are yet to come to pass. But one reason why the acharyas and so forth, they said, look, you can have priests, but there'll be those who want to be priests and those who have perfected themselves in the knowledge in the proper course of studies. Yes, there'll be warriors, but there'll be the guys with the good bodies who they're trained in courage, so as not to flinch in battle and, that sort of thing. And they'll be, but the vast majority, they're going to work in factories, they're going to work in offices, they're going to, So, the essence of Hinduism has got nothing to do with a particular mode of production, what in Marx calls a mode of production. So here, Hindutva, it is coincided with the legal conception of Hinduism, such that the essence of Hindutva, the essence of the religion of the people of the Indian nation, it's nothing to do with caste. In fact, caste is bad for a country, so let's get rid of it. It's nothing to do with gender discrimination, because we can see if the Israelis, they brought in women into the armed forces and they did well. So that's what it's obvious that if you bring in women, then you've just multiplied your potential military strength by 2. Let's do that. So, so really because, also thanks to the new technology, this new technology means that you have confidence that a kid in some small village somewhere, so long as they have access to so long as the chap has, or the girl has one of these, a smartphone, she could be a top nuclear physicist, she could be a top Sanskrit, chanting all the Vedas and whatnot in the perfect Sanskrit, why not? Or Arabic, or, So the idea that you have to have hereditary privilege and hereditary training within the family, that idea has gone. It's also gone because we can see, for example, in Bollywood, yes, there are very good stars, movie stars whose daddies and mummies and grannies and grandfathers and great grandfathers were superb actors. Yeah, we can see that that does exist. But when we look a bit closer, we find that these kids, when they were 14, 15 or whatever, yeah, they get a break. If they're good looking and they come and they can dance, they get a break. But if their films bomb, then they go into production, they go into some other field. Whereas, okay, if it's Amitabh Bachchan or Kangana Ranaut or whoever, or Shah Rukh Khan, initially for them it's more difficult. Amitabh Bachchan was driving a cab. Yeah, it could be a little bit more difficult. Shah Rukh Khan came in through TV, and but then they have prevailed, and we can see that it's on the basis of ability. But going forward, more and more, you see, the thing is that, again, look at this. We know that the kid, a 10-year-old kid or 8-year-old kid who makes a TikTok video showing that spark, we know that the talent scout will go to his village or to her village and give, there will be some platform. And by the age of 14, that kid would have an internet following equal to Salman Khan. In other words, technology has changed everything. And so, really the difference between Hindutva and Hinduism, now, for reasonable people, it has disappeared. They're one and the same thing. Furthermore, the old attitude was that India is very special, that all other countries should defend themselves, India should not defend itself. Instead, if anybody turns up and rapes your wife, then you should go and offer your buttocks and say, please sodomize me, because, India very holy, India very poor. This idea that virtue consists of doing stupid stuff, it was stylish, but it did exist. Oh, India is unique. India is not unique. It's a country like any other. And if it does stupid stuff, then it becomes poorer than any other. But if it does smart stuff, then it's fine. It's the same as any other. And Hinduism is the same as any other religion. Hindutva is the same as the essence of Christianity or the essence of Islam or anything else. And just as Christianity needs to get rid of things like racial discrimination, class feeling, feeling that one class is better than another. And Christianity, to a large extent, even during my own lifetime, it has done that. So when I was born, in America, there were some churches which said that the black man is inferior. For example, the Mormon church. And in fact, Mormons initially were more favorable to blacks, but because of the prevailing attitudes, they had to go the other way. But now they've completely got rid of it, and they're doing extremely well. Mormons are doing extremely well, purely on the basis that you see that the young people of that community, that they are decent, hardworking, And as Raj Chetty, he's done a study which shows that if you grow up in a Mormon neighborhood, even if you're not Mormon, your life chances are better. You have a much higher chance of finishing school, staying out of jail, staying out of drugs, prostitution. And these are the things which wreck, they wreck families. Nothing to do with your DNA or your, it comes down to making good choices. And if you live in a religious, ruled, decent, cheerful neighborhood, that's good for you as a kid. And Hindutva now is linked with the RSS, Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. But you see, the fact is that the RSS it actually does voluntary work. It actually does run schools. It actually does respond to floods, and it does something useful. So there's no point comparing it to Hitler's black shirts or brown shirts or Mussolini's black shirts or Hitler's. No, because those guys weren't doing voluntary work. And whereas with every other organization, sooner or later you get these allegations of corruption. You say that, but not so much in religion. So, for example, if you are contributing to a charity, which is like, say, a Jain charity, and I'm an accountant, I'll go there, I'll bloody do forensic auditing on the sly, and I find that there's no cheating. And this is for a reason that economists understand, that the people who are the main financiers, they are doing it so as to, for a very straightforward reason, for an incentive-compatible reason. They're not doing it to pull the wool over the eyes of, the tax man or to fool people, and very often. But they do care about their standing within their own community. And there they want to make sure that the money is very well spent, because then the other guys in the community will be going, oh, that's how to do it. So it's a reputational benefit. And it is effective. They're doing effective altruism. I know that they'd also waste some money on things which is purely religious. So from my point of view, it's a waste of money. But let's face it, without not spending on religious things, Jainism would have disappeared long ago, and that would be a tragedy for India. That would be a tragedy for Hindus. I'm not a Jain, but thank God it exists. It's useful to us. So really, to conclude, what is the difference between Hinduism now and Hindutva? And the answer is there's none. But there is a difference between Shashi Tharoor's Hinduism, which is casteist, which believes in the hereditary principle, whereby Rahul Gandhi must be, the ruler, at least of the Congress party, even if he doesn't want to be, Still, so this is the hereditary principle, and it's really the principle of corruption, of sweat equity, as he says. That, if you are sycophant of the dynasty, then you can enrich yourself. It's corruption, it's name dropping, it's, So that is his Hinduism. And, it does involve going to temple and so on. And in South India, you can see these guys, that they come in their limousine, and there's a long queue. The ordinary Hindu is standing in the queue. The devout Hindu is also standing in the queue, because it's good to be humble when you approach the Lord. But these guys, they'll be pushing past, they'll be immediately taken straight into the sanctum sanctorum. The priests will be, bowing down to them. And it's, the joke was that, the atheistic MP, the supposedly a rationalist, he was asked, he said, how come you keep going to this temple and breaking coconuts and performing this havan and that? What's going on? And he said, no, I am praying to God that atheism should prevail in India and religion should, opium of masses should disappear from India. So, and you see, there is that magical aspect of religion which greatly appeals to the corrupt, that they want that religion to survive, whereby, they go along to the temple and they priest is, and they feel that they've bribed God, and, they get a lot of sweat equity. So this is really this is the difference between the two. Now, it's also true that people like Tharoor, they pretend that they care about the minorities, about Christians and Muslims and so forth, but they don't. Because, Congress, when these guys were in power, the condition of But it was really the Muslims which went down terribly. Christians, it's a different story, because the fact is that the things which help the Christians to come forward, they also help the Hindus to come forward. And in Kerala, there is one other point which should be made, that you see the Muslims, if they succeed in the Gulf, then they're opening doors for Hindus and Christians. So, so Kerala is a little bit separate. But in other parts of India, insofar as Muslims are landless and they're more concentrated in lower skilled occupations, but even if they're high skilled, ghettoizing them reduces the elasticity of supply, and it means that more economic rent can be extracted from them. There you can't say that anybody has done them any favors. There's no such thing as secularism. There's just vote bank politics. And in Bengal, this is now the dilemma facing the Muslim. That on the one hand, he is constantly being threatened that, if BJP comes to power, you'll be deported, they'll kill you, they'll eat you, which isn't true. But, if so many people are saying it, and some of those people are smart, you've got to listen. You've got to listen. Now the imams who, they were given money by they're paid, they're given salary by Mamata Banerjee. And they're saying don't vote for Owaisi. But maybe, I don't know what will happen. Maybe the Muslims will say, well, hang on, if we vote for Owaisi, then we're saying, yes, we're Muslims. But we're also saying, please, God sake, you can't fool us. You can't play this game with us all the time. You can't pretend that there is some tiger which is about to pounce and eat us, and that if we don't vote for you, and if we don't put up with all this nonsense, that we will be destroyed. Because otherwise, you're basically a slave. You're accepting that somebody has a gun pointed at you, and only by slavish obedience can you preserve your life. So, but the other point I would make is that in Bengal, people look over there, look at Bangladesh, they look at how rapidly it's come up under Sheikh Hasina, and you see, this is the good part of Hindutva. Hindutva says Hinduism is just, the essence of Hinduism is that it's a religion like any other religion, and if Islam is doing something smart, copy that. For example, Islam is more against open defecation, and open defecation should be ended because it correlates with improved. It's good for the GNP, it's good for productivity, it's good for, it means you spend less on public health care, or you get better outcomes. So that's why when Modi became Prime Minister, and everybody was expecting him to stand up at Red Fort and to give a long speech saying, Mughals, we'll kill all of you now and we'll create the Hindu Russia. And he's talking about toilets. But toilets are good. And the Christians, we shamelessly imitate the Christians so as to come up a bit. And previously we did imitate Muslims when they had anything good. And now Bangladesh is showing something good. We don't want to imitate Pakistan's craziness. We want to imitate Indonesia, Bangladesh, and look at what's happening in Gulf. Look at Saudi Arabia. They're planning an amazing, knowledge city. I don't know whether all these things will come to pass. But what is certain is that by concentrating on the essence of the religion, that which is true of that religion in all possible worlds, which in fact, and what does that amount to? That amounts to Kripkean rigid designators. Because you see, what category theory, what was not realized about category theory is that it only concerns directed graphs. It doesn't concern platonic objects which exist eternally. No such things exist for category theory, for any useful sort of category theory. It's directed graphs. In other words, it's things which have a rigid designation and which represent a vector in time. So, so there is no philosophy here, there is no politics here, there is just stupidity, corruption, and paranoia of the Shashi Tharoor type. That's one thing which is there, but it's losing. It's pathetic. It's dying out. On the other hand, there is the Hindutva, which is, it's very good to have religious faith and to have good character and to avoid these evils which are condemned by religion. That's very good. And family should come up, community should come up in this way. But it's absolute nonsense to say that there is any such thing as caste, that caste is created by God or anything is there in the religion. No, endogamous groups are good. That's a solution to the stable marriage problem. In economics there's something called stable marriage problem. And, marriages become unstable if both parties are thinking, well, we can always do better, we can... we don't want to destabilize the marriage, we don't want to destabilize risk pooling by communities, we don't want to make things, to create anxiety and sexual sort of anxiety or to put too many sexual thoughts into young people's heads that they feel that, oh my God, I've got to be sucking cock by the time I'm 15 so as to be able to show to get a husband. We don't want that. But that's that's the alternative. You see, either parents say, yeah, you get a good husband. Depending on your qualities and your qualifications, you'll get a good husband or you'll get a good wife. Don't worry about it. You don't have to start sucking cock so that boys will like you, or knifing people to say, oh, so the girls will think I'm tough. We don't need that shit, So, this is the simple, I'm sorry, I've taken too much time. So this is my take on Hinduism versus Hindutva.